This prompted, I think, some deep feelings. I'm wondering if we have our mic movers in the audience. I'd love to get some initial reflections. What kinds of, what scenes, what words, what feelings from the film really stick with you? If I can see out there, you put a hand up and we'll get you a mic. I see one down in the middle and another on the right hand side. I'm not sure if we have our mic movers. They're coming. Okay. Well, as we're waiting, I see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody middle of the fourth row, and we've got one on my left in the fifth row when they come. Some of the things that really stuck with me were those scenes of community members, their strong feelings, their resistance, whether they were next to tents or they were in rooms with local officials. Go ahead.
First of all, thank, first of all, thank you so much. I learned a lot, which gave me new perspectives of working on my ideas. And today, it just made me cry. I took a lot of notes, which will help me. But one thing I want to mention is when there are many people coming together to exploit resources, we all can unite in a big way to make our lives thriving because earth is so beautiful and everyone has to get to experience the beauty of it. So thank you for the power of unity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Got another comment here?
Yeah, this question refers to the portion of that film which had to do with Putin allegedly getting control of the water supply of the Ukraine. I remember reading a book some years ago by the late Senator Paul Simon of Illinois, a great figure. It was called Tapped Out, The Depletion of the World's Water Supply. So I'm wondering if we can juxtapose Senator Simon's concern about the depletion of the fresh water supplies globally with what we saw in the film today. Would some of the people care to comment on that potential superposition of those two things?
Yeah, we've got some real emotions being felt, tears from the film, some questions about how the change in the water cycle, water availability, and climate relate to these land grabs, agriculture across the world. I think I saw a hand back here, gray sweatshirt.
I think what I'm kind of left with is we're in Chicago right now with a huge body of water, and we have such an influx of individuals like moving into the city. Like if you can kind of see, we're a model for what we saw in the film. It's actually happening real time right here, um, and those who are most affected, typically South and West sides, particularly Black and Brown people, we're kind of seeing it on the ground. It's happening right now. So it's a question of many intersecting things, and I think I'm kind of posing it to us all because we all kind of play a part in that. As I've been coming to the Wonder Film Festival screenings, I'm learning about the different ways we're contributing to these problems, and I kind of underline consumption. We want the newest phone, and we're being marketed to want this life of I gotta have pictures for my next trip. I gotta go here. I gotta go there, and we're feeding these companies that are using the money. So the money's leaving us and going right back to the companies to purchase for these land grabs. They're using our pensions to acquire and back their financing and things like that. I don't know enough about these things, but I'm getting the idea that we are the ones that are powering the engine of our own destruction. Through continuing to consume, through continuing to, I got to have the latest this, I have to have the latest that. Um, I don't want to talk too much, but I think there's so much here. I've given up everything that I had and I started to only consume or eat the things that I need and not overeat or not keep large, vast amounts of food like around because you don't need that. Someone else could be eating that food that's just sitting there. Community kitchens was a big thing when I was growing up and we were in shelters as a kid. You would go to a church and they'd feed everyone. So there was no need for you to have to cook at home. We're so independent now that we need to go to the store every day for something. And you don't need to if we batch together or we do food prep and you can eat off those meals for days and not have to constantly go to stores. It's going to have an impact, no less, because the system is used to us consuming that way. But I think we have to stop it at some point because if not, we're just going to continue to do this and, feeding people rotten food or food we don't want because, oh, that's 12 days old, but you could have ate that 12 days old bread 12 days ago and kind of shared sandwiches with people in your community who were hungry and they didn't have to spend money, which keeps that kind of tamed. So these are just some of the thoughts rolling around in my head. I hope they're welcomed and maybe it sparks someone saying, hey, let's get together, do a community kitchen and we can just feed people in our neighborhood and or other neighborhoods so they don't have to worry about food or water or have to keep consuming plastic water bottles, on the go. So,
Yeah, thank you for that. Harkening back to that scene where Holly Irwin hears about the pension, really powerful metaphor. We are powering the engines of our own destruction and then pushing right away, toward the solutions, right? Community kitchens coming together to raise our voices, which was the first comment we heard too. I think we have time for maybe one or two more voices from the audience before we turn to our incredible panel and remarkable local leaders. I see a hand in the back over here on my right side, a left hand side back, and then also and we've got someone already with a mic. Yes, and then let's go to back after that. Last two, please.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to say, like, you can really see in this movie how we as people and as governments criticize other countries' actions towards minority countries. And I think that a lot of what we say about what happens in other countries is really a reflection upon us because as you can see, they're taking advantage of the land of minority countries when and we're complaining about that when in reality we did the same thing to the native people of our land. And I think that a lot of what has been happening in the world we can't really see as we're, a lot of it is just hypocrisy because I feel like a lot of the stuff that we see in these movies and we criticize other people about, what I'm trying to say is that I think taking advantage of people is on small and large scales. And I think if we can recognize that it's bad on large scales, we should be able to understand the power and unity that we must have to affect it on a small, medium, and large scale so that this doesn't happen to anyone. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That those feelings of both like the horror and the rejection of those arguments when you see that there are these counter forces, right? Where did we hear that more meat, right, is eaten, more beef is being consumed in this country than in those developing countries in China, and it's being used as an excuse not to take more action here at home. Those really provoke a lot of feelings in me. I'm hearing from you that there are other solutions we can point to. Maybe one last in the back. I saw a hand, and then we'll introduce our panel.
Hi. In terms of you were talking about what emotions that it sparked or thoughts, of course, it's a very emotionally effective film. But I was also struck by just the apathy of the businesses in there because it also seems like a really stupid business strategy. Because I mean, yeah, okay. For when you think about how they're okay. We're gonna go in, we're gonna take resources, and then we're gonna sell it to countries that need it. Great, but that's such a short-term strategy. Obviously, people are gonna get mad about that. I mean, if someone came into my home and took my stuff, I'd be pissed off too, and I would want to revolt. And it just seems very short-sighted that they wouldn't consider that. And it also seems like we, in general, have a culture that celebrates the success of business and we don't think about the cost of it, because businesses are not necessarily operated with people in mind. Sometimes they are, but I think we have this very short-sighted view of business in general, because it's like, if a business is successful, we look up to that. But at what cost, you know? And the second thing that I was struck by is how much this is also happening here. I mean, we saw in Arizona how basically all the money was going to the Emirates, but the same thing has happened in Chicago. I've just heard recently that the price of, or sorry, not the price, the profits from parking tickets go directly to the Saudi government until the end of this century. And I think that's insane. And I think it's insane that we allow that, and that this kind of resource takeover is happening everywhere, just in front of us. And we just, nothing happens about it. I mean, something has happened because this film has been made, obviously, but it's just insane that more people don't know about this, because I think that's really wrong.
Yeah, good question. At what cost do we have these systems? They kept talking about those hidden um, impacts, the human cost of the kinds of systems that are impersonal, that really deny the specifics, the humanity, the communities, the reality of what's occurring. You know, and this is an opportunity we have here to really talk about those connections to land and water, the food system, that we have here in the Chicago region, and the opportunity we have to prolong and deepen those connections, and to safeguard from some of those challenges that we saw. And we are so lucky to have with us today Dr. Mila Marshall, a water advocate from the Sierra Club, who is an aquaholic, self-proclaimed lover of all things H2O, and really an advocate, someone I've seen speak at Chicago Wilderness Alliance events on the topic of our rivers here, those life forces for Chicago and our region. We also have with us Mirna Salgado. Feels so far away from you guys. I'm gonna get a little closer. Um, who is a co-founder of Neighbors for Environmental Justice and coordinator of Chicago Environmental Justice Network. So both of you've been involved in issues of connections to land, the threat of removal of land and property, also of water, the real core necessity, the need we have for clean water and the challenges we have with it. Water, I think you said earlier as we were planning, we have enough water, but it's not always in the right place at the right time, and it's not clean enough for human consumption. So I wanted to start with a question to each of you. What brings you here today? And what do you want? What are you hoping that our community here that we're growing will leave with? Mirna, why don't you start us off? Up? Yeah.
Here, can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay, good. Well, first I want to thank Hannah for bringing me into the One Earth Film Festival space. This was a really great opportunity to collaborate with organizations across the city of Chicago, which is one of the things that I do in my full-time job with Chicago Environmental Justice Network. And I think that is the one thing that I am celebrating today is collaboration of the efforts that we're doing collectively across the city of Chicago, across the nations. And that is what brings me here today. And I'm super excited to be able to share about some of the work that we've done and continue to do, and just the connections around the film that we view today.
Thank you so much. I told Mirna before, as we were planning this, that I no longer in this world, this kind of tremulous moments that we are living through now, I can no longer answer the question, how are you doing, monosyllabically. And so I've learned that one of the things that we can bring into a conversation through a purpose, what brings you here today, but also what are you celebrating today instead of how are you doing. So that's actually what I'll ask you, Mila. What brings you here today and what are you celebrating?
So again, thank you so much for having me. This is my second time with the One Earth Film Festival, and I'm the Clean Water Advocate for the Sierra Club Illinois chapter. What brings me here is I am a believer, a firm believer, that water is a human right and that we shouldn't have to put it into law for it to be true. And so, with that, we do know that we need water for our own consumption. So too do our industries in order for them to create products and provide services. So too do our ecosystems so that water can move across its natural water cycle and all of the other sentient beings. And so, having films as a part of the way to have the conversation, I think, is really important because who follows the Sierra Club on Instagram? Raise your hands.
Who doesn't? Come on.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and continue to do so. But as you can see, most people did not raise their hands. And so it's stories like this that will help people understand the breadth and depth of the issues. And then also, there's so little environmental journalism that is in in our access that films become the vehicle for people like me that work on environmental lobbying on your behalf as the people. This becomes a huge opportunity for me to make that connection for how can you take action, how can we do it together, and how can we understand what's happening in central Illinois and southern Illinois and who their bad guys are and how we can go to Springfield and raise some hell.
Yeah. So, on the topic of raising hell, I wanted to hear this was a film with really big themes. We traveled all around the world, Arizona, Saudi Arabia, China, Southern Africa. What, what of those scenes and examples, what folks were facing and the hell they were raising in return, what resonated with you bringing it back to Chicago? What made the most connection to what you have experienced, the kinds of advocacy and confronting that you've had to do?
Can I start? Do you mind? So I'll say one. I was quick. I was looking up all of these things like that came at the last minute. First of all, the courage of the reporters, right? So UNESCO has a survey that they did a couple of years ago of 900 environmental journalists from around the world. 70% of them said that they have been harassed, they have been attacked, and it has been unsafe for them to tell their stories. And so people want to get this information out, but y'all, it's dangerous, right? I was told, closed doors, it's dangerous for me to advocate against certain water issues here in Chicago, right? Like every year we have this one thing that happens at the river that everybody loves, but it's kind of a problem. And if you say something about it, it could be a problem for you. And so being told that there could be prepared for death threats because I'm trying to help the Chicago River stay clean is a bit intimidating, right? And how do you go to the public saying, hey, come out here and lobby and help me stop this thing that also brings money to the city? Like these issues are challenging. And so knowing that the reporters also had the wherewithal to record it real time and seeing them get kicked out, this happens more often than not. There are stories that don't come out, conversations that will not happen because of elected officials that are a part of the conversations, appointed individuals, then there are companies that are a part of it. And so for me, it was just like the courage of those in the humanities to write, to speak, to create art, to create films. Like that is an act of resistance. And I was just so grateful that we have people that are courageous enough to tell the stories.
Yeah, very powerful. There are many groups that keep this kind of statistics. You were talking about how many journalists are threatened around the world. The Committee to Protect Journalists is one of them. Myrna, what about for you? What resonated?
I think something that resonated with me immensely was the exploitation of land. I think even in the south and southeast side here in Chicago, we've noticed that industry has come into our neighborhoods and has exacerbated the land use and left it in like just devastating circumstances. And one of the things that I was thinking about when watching this and film that we watched Wednesday at the Hills at another One Earth Film Festival was about the steel mills in Chicago, Illinois. They're no longer here, but they've left all of this burden on the residents in those communities now, and they're nowhere to be found in terms of accountability for the damage that they've done to the land. And it's happening already here. Well, we may want to see it or not want to see it, it's happening. And it's been happening for years. And so it's important for us to work together to address and share these stories of things that we're experiencing in our neighborhoods and making it a point to hold our electeds and our government accountable, because that is also something that has been resonating in the work that I do with the organizations that we collaborate with, is that it's the work is being left up to us to be able to identify the things that are not being done that we were promised that would be taken care of in our communities.
Yeah. So, Mirna, you brought it back to ground here. We've got brownfields in Chicago. We have this legacy of industrial pollution that we're still living with long after the steel mills are gone. I'm wondering, Mila, if you could talk to us a little bit about the issues of water ownership, water access that are local, connecting those themes in the film to our place of residence.
Ooh, where do I start? Right. And I was looking, I'm like, oh man, I'm wearing all shades of blue. Like I got on the dark blue.
I thought maybe that was
Light
always.
blue. I'll start with the moment I realized that water was this elitist resource. And hopefully you'll kind of follow me along with this. I've been in the environmental justice arena for 20 years. Actually started when I was a child doing a science fair project, What Environment Decomposes Waste the Best. That got me learning that those hills on Bishop Ford, like those are landfills. I had no clue about the development of housing projects, where they were located, industrial rivers and water quality. Like all of this just came from a science fair project. Fast forward to graduate school, and I was working with urban farmers. And immediately I started to think about, like, all right, we're talking about like sustainable agriculture, but are we really quantifying the amount of water that's needed or would be needed under certain management regimes and whatever it is that you're planting? And I remember being at a conference with an urban farm here in Chicago, and I asked them, I'm like, well, how much water do you use in a day? And the dude legitimately said, I don't know. And I thought, how couldn't you know? But they were hooked up to the fire hydrant. And at this time, there were no water policies for farmers, and all you had to do was just hook up to it. So now here's an interesting issue we're experiencing. Access to water for an urban farm or an urban garden providing food for the community, that's great. Summertime, it's a drought, might be a problem because it's depleting the pressure. And if there's a fire, we have an issue. And immediately I thought, who wasn't a part of the conversation about water access for farms? Our first responders that are firemen. So as I started to peel back the layers of water access and water, water equity and water issues, I kept coming to everybody's not clear on how much water we have, where it is, who has jurisdiction over it, under what circumstances it can be used, who's responsible for cleaning it. And it is extremely litigious at times. And so us as people, we don't know how to advocate for our water. We don't necessarily even understand what the issues are until they are issues. My basement is flooded. My water got shut off. Why is there a boil order? Right? We have very privileged water issues, very different from Central Illinois, where they're trying to do like fracking and they have one aquifer, or there is potential algal blooms, or you're next to a pig farm. And so the water issues can be regional. They can be by industry. If you are a renter, you're not really worried about water because you might not pay a water bill. But if you're a homeowner, you pay a water bill. If you live close to the lake, you might be concerned about shoreline erosion. If you live further inland, away from water, you have no clue even what the lake looks like, right? And so it's this dynamic of where you live, what you do, and there are a myriad of water issues, but it's exciting to know that people like you are interested. How do I continue to learn? How does this impact me? Because there are similar situations of folks coming into the Great Lakes, looking to buy our water and move it across the nation or even across the world.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a complex issue. There are many different stakeholders. There's so many layers, and nobody has a view into every piece of the puzzle. Mirna, you were saying something similar before the film, that the strategies that were employed here are the same that are needed for environmental justice. I think you said follow the money. So what are the methods? How do we get from this like opacity and complexity towards a solution?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. I don't know if I have the answer to that, but I can definitely answer to just some of the ways that we've been working together is really sharing the knowledge of what's happening and the experiences of what people are facing. One of the things that I saw in the film that was utilized as a tool to combat the issues of this oppression is to sue the government, and that is the way that we were able to accomplish one of the biggest pieces of environmental justice legislation that is currently being proposed at the city level in the city of Chicago, which is the Cumulative Impacts Ordinance. And I think that just to share a little bit of context, it was through a voluntary compliance agreement through the HUD settlement in which we were able to accomplish this. And so I think we need to utilize all of the resources possible, but this is something that as grassroots organizations, frontline communities that are facing these issues today are starting to realize that in order to combat these issues, we need to combat them in the same way that they're being used against us.
And just for folks, just in case folks don't know, could you tell us something about the Hazel Johnson Cumulative Impacts
Yes.
Ordinance, please?
So Hazel Johnson is the founder of Environmental Justice, and they began in Southeast Side, an organization called People for Community Recovery. In 1994, with President Clinton, they were able to enact the Environmental Justice Agreement. And so through that, many organizations started to form to start to address the same issues that they were facing in their communities for various industries relating to pollution for steel mills, coal plants, asphalt plants in some communities. And so now we have formed through coalition of many organizations that have been facing these issues, a partnership for the first time ever in collaboration with the City of Chicago to start to establish reforms and solutions to combat these issues. So the Cumulative Impacts Ordinance is set to establish a health assessment and a cumulative burden assessment before industry is intended to develop in the community. And so now we are going to start to work backwards to correct things that should have been addressed a long time ago. We had never taken into account what kind of burdens and what kind of health impacts industry we're going to have in communities. And so now we're putting that at the forefront of a permitting process in order to start to hopefully address some of the issues that frontline communities are facing in Chicago.
And if I can add, just spatially, 60% of Chicago's industry is located on the southeast side of Chicago. So when you think about how our built infrastructure and natural infrastructure exists, it has to kind of make sense. So our commercially zoned areas are in a certain location, our residentially zoned areas, how transportation moves around, like how our city is shaped is meant for efficiency as well as profitability. So how is it that you accommodate really big industrial neighbors? They need what? A lot of land and a lot of what? Water, right? Some for non-contact cooling water. They got to cool themselves off, and the water goes back to the surface waters.
Just for reference, that includes quantum computing.
The quantum computing campus that's supposed to be coming, which is also a very interesting project. We know people are going to be coming to the Midwest because we have so much water. I wake up every day feeling like a very wealthy woman. I live right across the street from Lake Michigan. You cannot convince me that $1 is worth more than a sip of water. I won't believe it. And to see our economy continue to thrive because of it. How many cities Chicago sells our water to? Now, Department of Water operates on a surplus. Like, we know that this is a commodity, but also we know that we have a target on our back. We're going to be the gatekeepers for who gets access to this water. We just made a 100-year deal with Joliet. It was a historic deal, right? There will be other cities coming to us. There will be cities that cannot afford to pay for their water. Chicago has sued 2 Black communities in the past because they couldn't pay their water bill. And so we are up against this fight for not just drinking water equity, but even sanitation equity. Our legislators don't really understand the science behind water conservation and water conservation investments over commercial, industry, residential. It's my hopes that through this ordinance, number one, we can start to acknowledge, like, yeah, when you put all of the industry on one side of town, you're going to have some concentrated, unique impacts for the people in that area. It's not rocket science, but the way that people make decisions absent of science is just unfortunate. When we as the public increase our understanding of natural history, how water is supposed to flow, where it is that we should be building so that we can have more efficient transportation. We can start to address the inequities that, if we did it in a different way, could cause harm to some of our most vulnerable of our community, which is increasing, whether those are immigrant populations, weak market communities, low income, people of color. And EJ communities aren't just communities of color. They're not. They don't. There are some communities that are white, they're poor, they're rural. They're just as much in need as us in the city. And I want to continue to say environmental injustice can happen to anyone of any ethnicity in this state. And if we keep that at the forefront of our mind, that inequity can exist anywhere in 102 counties, and it's our job to identify who's the vulnerable and how do we help, I think we'll be on a good way.
So, before the film, I asked you both, what is one thing you hope that our audience can take away? We had a heavy film. We had these big forces that seem stronger than any single nation, let alone individuals. But Mirna, you had something that you wanted everyone to know based on the experience of Chicago Environmental Justice Network.
Yes, I think the first step was coming to a One Earth Film Festival. I think you've already done one of the biggest things that you could do to get involved in the process and to learn about what is happening in your communities and what is happening in your city, your state, your nation. This is something that sparked my interest not that long ago. I've only started probably organizing since like 2016, and it was because it started to happen in my community. And it doesn't have to get to the point for it to happen to you in order for you to do something about it. And so I think it's important to be here today to talk to your neighbors, to talk to your friends, to talk to your family. This is a conversation you should be having with your family about the future that they are inheriting, the future that their children are inheriting, and what we can do today about changing that tomorrow. And we definitely have to get involved in politics, as much as it's a taboo subject and sometimes people don't want to talk about it. I'm so impressed with the work that they were doing in Arizona, Republicans and Democrats working together to combat these issues that were happening in that state. And while I know we don't always agree on the same principles and values, there is common ground. There is compromise that we can make to work together to make these changes and not have these issues impact us in the short term.
Yeah. Mila, you said something about water.
I did. One, I hope you leave here with water is a human right. Begin to acknowledge when you start to make excuses for when it's not. So I learned this lesson when we're advocating for lead service line removal, and there then came across my email an invitation to come to a meeting for the Illinois prison water crisis, where prisoners in state property or state infrastructure were being exposed to poor drinking water conditions. And I was shocked at the allies that did not show up because of these people were incarcerated. And I had to ask myself, do I really mean clean water for all? People were sentenced to, pay their dues. They weren't sentenced to be poisoned. So when are we complicit? When do we stand up for communities that we don't belong to? Do we truly mean clean water for all? And do we understand what that requires of us? It does mean that you have to read more. Sorry. It does mean you have to write more. Your legislators, write op-eds, write to your letters to the editor. It does mean that you have to poke the bear a little bit, maybe at church, or maybe, as the president of the LSC, bringing in these conversations and bringing in professionals. So there is a community of STEM professionals that are diverse. So shout out to the environmentalists of color. If you do not have a scientist in your network, find me on LinkedIn, right? At this point, we all need somebody that understands what is going on. You do not have to be the person to have all of the knowledge, but do start to make connections with other professionals, other practitioners that can be your liaison for what is happening in public policy. Can you help me understand what's happening with the EPA? How does this have anything to do with my industry or my business? So that's what I want you to leave with, that action of who can I add to my network that can be my water guru, my climate change guru, that if I have a question or I have a need or I need a lead, I'm going to contact that person. You do not have to do it on your own. We are better together. And there is power in what?
Unity. Yeah. So I just want to, with that, thank Mirna and Mila for your incredible leadership and also for coming today. I wanted to call out, I saw on Brig a shirt that said Southern Africa Litigation Center. Look it up if you haven't heard of it before, you don't know about that heroic work. But also locally, you hopefully got to see in the rotunda some of the actions and the groups that are really moving things forward here on climate, on water, on food, and on land in the Chicago region. I'm very proud to be part of one, Oak Park Climate Action Network, a group of us who just care about these issues, got together and we said, not one more day without action on climate. And so you can act without a 501c3, without legal designation, without the foundations of major institutions. And we find that over time, it makes real change and meaningful change, and it's fun. So I highly recommend it. I want to thank so much the Chicago Cultural Center for allowing us to have this venue and this opportunity to come together. DCASE for your support, the One Earth Film Festival, and all of the folks. Can we get hands together for the folks in the back who made it possible for all of this? Thank you.